Yainer Diaz has been fantastic for the Astros. Fourth best OPS on this team. Yainer Diaz, by the way, that OPS he has, 786. He would be sixth amongst catchers in baseball if he had enough plate appearances to qualify. So it is in a day we do cash him or trash him. Yainer Diaz at some point in his career is going to be like a top 3 offensive catcher in Major League Baseball.
I can see it.
We know because we've lived a lot of light-hitting catchers in this city. Martin Maldonado currently, Torino's, Brad Ausmus. Let us know your light-hitting Houston Astro catcher, 713-780-3776. Yainer Diaz has a chance to be one of the better ones for the Houston Astros. We know that Dusty doesn't love Yainer Diaz behind the plate. I think that that's very evident with as much as he's willing to play Martin Maldonado. I think it's evident by how many starts Salazar got behind the dish when he was supposed to be the third catcher of this team. I think it's obvious when Dusty Baker talks about just how Sally saw the pitchers through the game. Maldy's elite at seeing pitchers through the game. So, okay, I'll listen to that, Dusty. And Dusty, we trust you. You've won, tons of Major League Baseball games. Top 10 ever. You just won a World Series. I'll take your word for that because I can't argue with you. You're a genius. You always have been. My plan to give Yainer Diaz more at-bats, and y'all can just shoot this down, 713-780-3776. This was kind of my plan for the Astros getting Wilson Contreras last year, where he's kind of your backup catcher, but you move him around the field. I want to see Yainer Diaz, and let's assume this is a normal week. You don't have a day off. You currently don't this week. You start Yainer Diaz 2 games behind the dish. You're playing 7 games in a week most weeks. That's still 5 games for Martin Maldonado. Martin starting 5, Yainer starting 2 for a week. Martin Maldonado is still your primary catcher. That's not even 40% of the starts behind the plate. So you start Yainer 2 games a week behind the dish. Jose Abreu's been bad at baseball. I'm not saying to bench Jose Abreu and to make him your backup first baseman, but same plan with Martin Maldonado. Yainer Diaz gets 2 starts a week at first base. That means Jose Abreu still gets 5. He's older. You want to take care of him. Hopefully it kind of fixes him. And then one time a week, I know that Jolks is swinging a good bat. One time a week, you start him as your designated hitter. And I know that can be difficult because you only have 2 catchers on this team, but how often does Martin Maldonado leave a game? If Martin Maldonado has to leave a game, you can just burn the DH and move Yainer behind the dish. And again, this is only one time a week. 2 times he gets a started catcher. 2 times a week he starts at first base. 1 time a week he's my designated hitter. Yainer Diaz is now a permanent fixture in this lineup because he's starting 5 games in a single week.
That's fine. I mean, look, I like getting him as many at-bats as possible, and I think that that's a reasonable plan for him. And I would go so far as to say that I believe that you could actually get him with the pitchers that he'd be catching. We talked about this yesterday. I think that there's a chance for him to get 3 starts eventually as you start getting, again, with Bielak, with Hunter Brown, if Blanco's going to be in the rotation for a while, and France, you have 4 opportunities to get him 3 starts, for those 3 starters. And now that might be too much right off the top, but if he keeps hitting the baseball and he starts improving on whatever Dusty wants him to improve on defensively, then I think that there's an easy path to taking your schedule but making him more of a role, an important role as the catcher by the time you get to the midseason point, and then as you start heading towards the playoffs.
A gradual takeover of the position. Yep. I love that. I don't think Dusty was willing to do that.
I think that's where I have concerns too. I think it would work. I think as long as he does his part, I think you could easily see that progression end up with him being the guy when you start getting close to the playoffs. But I agree with you. Between, Dusty's gut feelings and the fact that he's loyal and how much he loves Maldy, it may never get there. I think this is kind of like when you said what you had your plan when they were looking at Contreras. This was my plan when they made the trade for Vasquez. I thought, hey, they're getting this guy who is a way better offensive player, but about the same kind of catcher. And I could see by the time they really get into the playoffs, Vasquez is your starting catcher, and he was an insurance policy.
Yeah. I would love if Yainer Diaz got groomed to be the permanent catcher for this team by September. I don't think that's going to happen with Dusty Baker managing this team. And look, I'll even concede the fact to Dusty Baker that you don't need him to be because Martin Maldonado is great at calling a game. So, if I concede that point, cool. I'm willing to meet you halfway here. I don't need you, Dusty, to name Yainer Diaz the primary catcher. He's the backup. He's starting 2 games a week behind the dish. Jose Abreu has struggled, and I understand you want to get him going, and I know he wants to play every day. But a lot of times, old guys need days off. I'm not so sure that giving Jose Abreu 2 games off a week won't help Jose Abreu. So Jose Abreu, you're still my primary first baseman, but you're not playing twice a week because Yainer Diaz is, and Yainer Diaz, quite frankly, is hitting better than you. And Yainer Diaz, because I think he's one of your better offensive players, I think he would be if you gave him a lot of plate appearances, you're starting 1 time a week as the designated hitter. Yainer Diaz is starting 5 games a week. You need to get his bat in the lineup, and I think it's even more important with the Astros' struggles offensively. I know that they're showing signs of life. I know Altuve, until recently, is back. I know Bregman's coming alive. I know that we think Jose Abreu's starting to come around a little bit. You're getting surprises from Jake and Corey Julks. Chas McCormick's having a good year as well. But Yainer Diaz is probably one of your top 5, 6 offensive players on this team and needs to be in the lineup 5 times out of 7 games.
Look, you understand in the last week or the last 5 games exactly why Dana Brown made the statement that he made to start the year and how many at-bats he wanted to see Yainer Diaz get. And they were way behind in trying to make that quota. There's got to be a way to get this, and especially if he keeps hitting the way he's hit over the last 5 games, you have to find a spot to put him in the lineup. As much as the fans were clamoring for, hey, when Altuve's back, you have to find a spot for Dubon. Well, you have to find a spot for Yainer because he has pop, because you see the extra base hits coming as quickly as you see just any kind of hit coming from him. Double, home run, double, goes the other way last night, goes right down the line and paints one down the first baseline. The outfielder made a nice play. It was a single, not a double. But again, it shows you the versatility and the way that he can hit the baseball. As long as he's hitting like this is a guy you do have to find a spot for in the lineup.
Diaz started 0 for 8 on the year. So early in the year, he wasn't playing his way into the into the lineup. I get it whenever he's struggling, right? If he's struggling, cool. He's just your backup catcher. You're not trying to force his way into the lineup. But whenever you have a player that's going well, and I really do believe that Yainer Diaz is one of the top 5 offensive players on this team. After 6 or 7. After Yainer Diaz started the year 0 for 10, you know what he's done in his last 70 plate appearances? He's hitting .318. Yainer Diaz is hitting .318 over his last 70 plate appearances after starting 0 for 10 on the year. That comes with 3 home runs. That comes with an OPS of .860. That is one of your top 5 offensive players. So Yainer Diaz has to play more. Yainer Diaz, and again, look, Dusty, you're telling me that Martin Maldonado is your primary catcher. Cool. You're telling me Jose Abreu is your primary first baseman. Cool. You're telling me that somebody else is your primary DH, probably Jordan, but Jordan plays left field every now and then. That's the time you would get Yainer in as the DH. Fine. Yainer doesn't have to be the starting catcher. Yainer doesn't have to be the primary first baseman. Yainer doesn't need to get the most at-bats as the designated hitter. 2 games behind the dish, 2 games at first, 1 game is your DH, and you have a top 5 offensive player on this team playing 5 out of every 7 days. It is a no-brainer.
No, look, I think the biggest stumbling block is going to be Dusty Baker.
Yep.
And that's the biggest problem. And that's where you wonder the lines of communication as how long are they going to be open and how long is he going to be open to Dana Brown and others getting into his ear and saying, hey, look, this is the dude right now that we have to find a spot for. And I understand that you're loyal to guys across the diamond, Abreu and Maldi and whoever, wherever, but this is the best thing for this team, especially with Abreu underachieving. This is a guy that you pretty much didn't pencil in to have any kind of a real role on this team in spring training. Suddenly, Dana Brown sees something to say that he should get this many at-bats. Now the way he's hitting the ball when he's getting any at-bats, you need to find a spot for him. And I think that this is where we're going to see if there's a difference between the Baker-Click relationship of a year ago and now with Dana Brown in the conversation and in the mix. Is there a way they can find a happy medium to make this happen?
Yeah, get his bat in the lineup. Any arguments that he's not one of your top 5 or 6 best offensive players?
Small sample size. Is it real? Maybe. But
is he better than Peña?
From an offensive perspective, yes. I think as a hitter specifically, I think he's a better offensive player than Peña.
I kind of lean that
I really
way.
do.
I still worry about Peña with breaking pitches and sometimes pitch selection that he swings at, to where I think that when you add in the extra pop, consistent pop that Diaz brings you, I understand what Peña did a year ago. Mm-hmm. But this season, I would lean Diaz being a better option than Peña.
I think it's somewhat close.
It is.
And maybe there's a little recency bias here, but Yainer, he has a top 5 OPS on this team. So he's behind Jordan, Altuve, Tucker. I would have it Yainer.
I think the way Bregman's hitting right now, Bregman's
the way that Bregman's hitting right now,
yes.
It'd be silly to say Yainer better than Bregman.
Right.
But after that, you're not saying Abreu. Are you saying Chas is better hitter than Yainer?
No.
I wouldn't quite go that far. Jake's not. I love Julks. Julks, I don't think is as good a hitter as Yainer. Mm-hmm. I think Yainer's your 5th best offensive player.
I mean, you could put Dubon in the mix because he's played enough games.
Yeah, but he just doesn't have the power.
He doesn't have any pop.
Like he's going to get a high. He's going to hit
to a 300
Yeah,
hitter.
he's going to be close to a 300 hitter. But Yainer Diaz over his last 70 plate appearances over 300 with homers with extra base
Right.
hits.
The power is the big key.
Yeah, to me, I think Yainer's a top five hitter on this team. 713-780 ESPN. So treat him as such, and he doesn't even need to be the primary guy at any position.